everybody, hope you're doing well and welcome back to another video. This is my best books of 2024. Out of the 120 I read, we had 8 5-star reads, and I think last year it was maybe 28. I can't remember now. It was a lot, like it was a lot more. I read more that year, but still the percentage is a lot smaller. But there is still ones that are like 4.75, which I do really enjoy. It's just they didn't have that like final clinching like 5-star energy that the other ones did have. But yeah, I think although I'm a little bit annoyed with the lack of full 5 stars, there are still books that I did read that did have quite a big impact on me and has stayed with me. But this year I'm hoping for more, and I want to try and stop just reading books even if I'm not enjoying them. Like, I need to like try and get out of this mindset because I just have so many books and I don't want to waste myself on a 3-star when there can be a 5-star lurking behind. But yeah, anyway, first of all, I'll just go through my honorable mentions with my 4.25 stars, and these are in no particular order. We have Lula Dean's Little Library for Banned Books by Kirsten Miller, Hideous Beauty by William Hussey, and Boys Run the Riot Volume 4 by Keiichi Gaku, translated from the Japanese by Leo McDonough. Also Autobiography by Kirsten Lauren, translations by Brian Friel. Camp Damascus by Chuck Tingle, Learned by Heart by Emma Donoghue, My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix, More Days at the Murasaki Bookshop by Satoshi Yakasawa, translated from Japanese by Eric Ozawa. And finally, My Mother Says by Stein Pilgaard, translated from Danish by Hunter Simpson. All of them I enjoyed a lot and I would really recommend them. They all have their own individual, you know, personalities and things that I really enjoyed. But as with the other ones, they didn't really clench me fully. Now my 4.5 stars, and again there's no particular order to these. A Million Aunties by Alicia Mackenzie, really enjoyed this. 14 Days, edited by Margaret Atwood and Douglas Stewart, but featuring the works of all these authors. Yeah, really like unique, and I love the way it was like put together. Yeah, would really recommend that. I'm gonna stop saying that because that is true for every book I'm talking about here. Bellies by Nicola Dinan. I think the next thing she writes, I think, is probably going to be a 5-star for me, but it just needs a little bit more. Cold Enough for Snow by Jessica Au. It's just like so calming. I really loved the like reading experience with this. It was really enjoyable. A Good Guy's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson, really want to continue the series. Straight Jacket by Matthew Todd. Yeah, we really recommend this. A lot to like say and get from it, and it's a very like deep breadth study of overcoming society's legacy of gay shame, as the subheading says. In Memoriam by Alice Wynne. Yeah, it was really good. It's just there were some parts that sort of brought it down more than things not living up to what my expectations in some sense, I guess. Queer in the Greek Myths, All the Violet Tiaras by Jean Menzies. Yeah, really good. Game On by Matt Cain. I absolutely love Matt Cain so much. He's my favourite author, but it's a little bit too short to have as much with the characters as you need to have. The Poetry Collection, At Least This I Know by Andres N. Orderica. Yeah, probably the best like fully queer poetry I read this year. Yeah, so much like starred and underlined and stuff in here. Really recommend checking it out. And finally, for my 4.5 stars, Little Boxes by Cecilia Knapp. Yeah, really good. Just a little dense maybe. Now we're going to go from 20 to 1, and I'll just tell you a little bit more about them. And first of all, we're starting with my final 4.5, but I wanted to add it in the 20 to create a nicer number. Skin by Kerry Andrew. Yeah, I really enjoyed this. I think it's a really like well told story, and the sort of like the moments that when something clicks in your mind as you're reading it, you're like, okay, this is good. Yeah, this is basically following Matty, and they lose their father, or like the father like leaves, and they're trying to work out sort of like what happened, and then it follows them later, and it's sort of like this running theme of water and the power and beauty of it, but also the dangers of it, and also the like impact of sort of like a split second like snap moment like that, and how it can like really impact your life. I do think that they can be a really good author for me. I read this on Transwrites Readathon, and I would so recommend it. And also in that video I read Juno Roach's Gender Explorers. This is a non-fiction book where she basically talks to these young gender explorers, like young people in the UK that are trans or non-binary, or you know, under the umbrella genderqueer and things, and they're just such lovely and beautiful souls that you just want the best for. It's quite emotional, some things that they've gone through. It's really like eye-opening and important, and you learn sort of about like the politics and the education, the way things are changing for trans people in the UK specifically, yeah, I would just so recommend this. It was a very pleasant read, despite some topics, but yeah, on the whole it was great. Now we're going into my 4.75 stars. Kunk on Everything by Philomena Kunk. I adore this woman. She is so funny, she's so witty, the humour is just, I love it so much. I've watched all her shows, and yeah, I just love Diane Morgan as well, the woman who portrays this character. This is just like an encyclopedia of like things. I learned some stuff, but a lot of it is sort of nonsense as well, but it's just a really fun read, just to like get away from some heavier things, I guess. It's just fun, and we need a little bit of fun sometimes. Then we have the poetry collection Bone by Yasta Daly Ward. I like underlined and starred and stuff in this book because there's a lot to take away from it. It follows the author sort of like her childhood, in a sense, growing up in Chorley, I want to say, and her like sexuality and dealing with like mental health and some other like issues in her life, and sort of like her family and like moving different places and femininity as well. Yeah, a lot to unpack. I do want to give this a reread because I think I maybe rushed it a bit, but I do remember that there was a lot in here that sort of like is important, and yeah, great. Then we have Pity by Andrew Macmillan, and his, I do really want to read some of his poetry coming up. This is a strange one, really. It's sort of follows different generations of one family in Barnsley, which is the next mining town in Yorkshire. It's sort of weirdly set out. There's like different like narrative forms in a sense, but we're following sort of a man on his journey to the mines when they were open, and then also the like sons of him, and then also the son of one of his sons, of his grandson basically, and explores sort of like queerness in the contemporary age, and like the impact of this town and how it's sort of like degraded in a sense, and like sort of who are there now, and yeah, a lot to unpack, and it's very ambitious for its short size, but yeah, I really enjoy this, and it's so like well written, and you really get a sense of like who these characters are. My only issue is that I do wish it had been longer, because there was a few things that you just sort of want a bit more explanation with, and a bit more to, you know, get your teeth into, but yeah, it did leave its mark. Next is A Kind of Spark by Elle Nicole. I love this. It's hard to read her as well at times, but it's basically following Addie, and she is autistic, and she is learning about the witch trials of Juniper, this fictional village where she lives, and she's also being bullied by a girl in her class, and the teacher's not really doing anything and bullying her as well, and it sort of explores sort of like the sort of microaggressions in a sense, or things that people like say to autistic people, and what it's like to like live in her mind and body in some sense. So she's learning about these witches who were like othered and excluded from society, and they didn't really like know how to react to what was happening to them, and sort of like went along with things because they just didn't know what to do, and it's really upsetting. And I was reading it sort of like around other witch adjacent books earlier in the year. Nearly all I really enjoyed, and I just felt like really emotionally connected to them, and also the main character and her older sister Kidi, who is the main character in the prequel, which I really want to read this year. And yeah, I just thought it was such a powerful book, set for a middle grade audience, but adults can learn from it as well, specifically when we're not, you know, understanding autistic people and sort of brushing aside their actions as like misbehavior or whatever. But yeah, great. Then we have The Love of Singular Men by Victor Herringa. She's translated from Portuguese by James Young. Yeah, I really enjoyed this. I think I need to give this again a reread and sort of go over it and underline things and stuff. It's basically following Camilo, and it's in 1970s Rio, and his family has this new boy Cosme come to like stay with them, and they sort of start like a love in a way, in a sense, but it's not like too much of one. And then it leads up to this like act of violence, and the main character is thinking back to this time, I want to say like in the 2010s maybe, I'm not sure, but he's thinking back to this hot summer, and it talks about sort of like the sweltering heat of like Rio and like the North Zone, and like the poverty in a way, and the like in like the place of people there. And yeah, it definitely explores quite a lot. Maybe I didn't love all the plot points or certain parts, but it is really well written, and it's just, yeah, it was very quite like unique as well, with like some of the parts in here. But yeah, I really want to check out his book that's was released in English last year, Gloria. But yeah, it's just I keep like, whenever I think about his book, I feel like it's such a shame because he's no longer with us, and I feel like he has so much of a talent, and it's just, yeah, quite sad to think about. But he did leave something beautiful behind, no matter the horrific nature of some parts of this book. The Upside of Unrequited by Becky Albertelli. This is the second in the Simon verse sort of books, but it's not within the Creekwood series. So she wrote Simon vs. the Homo sapiens Agenda, and I read all of those books this year, but this was the best one. Yeah, I really enjoyed this. It's basically following Molly, and she's a bit of a bigger girl. She is the cousin of Abby, I believe, right? Who is the friend of Simon from those books, and she lives in Washington. She her sister is a lesbian, and she is like used to like hookups in a way, but she finds this new girl, and she's like, okay, maybe something more is going to come from this. And also they have queer mums who I loved, and a little younger brother as well. But Molly's sister and her new girlfriend trying to set her up with like one of their friends, but she's also like, oh, I kind of like this guy from the like summer work thing I'm doing at the moment. And it sort of explores sort of like what it's like being a bigger person and trying to like maybe like find a romance or a love, and the ways that sort of like you don't put yourself forward because you're scared of rejection. And I'm like, oh, and I get you. And also this sort of like feelings of like seeing other people around you having like different experiences and moving on with their life, and you know, having different romances and like relationships and stuff, like your friends and your family and like other people around you just see, and you're just thinking like, well, what about me? When's my time? When am I gonna have that? Like yeah, I just felt so like related to this character quite a lot, yeah, I just really loved her and the way it explores these themes. And yeah, I guess also it's not about how like if you find a boyfriend or a partner that is going to make you happy. It's more about like trying to overcome these ideas of like not putting yourself out there for rejection, because there's always the what ifs, and if you never take the what ifs, then you're always left with nothing. So yeah, impactful, really good for a YA book, and I implore everyone to give this a read. Next is Ghost of Button House Archives by Yeah, I adore Ghosts. I absolutely love this series so much. It's one of my favorite series ever. And these are basically archives that are like about the different residents who are ghosts and their like past lives. You sort of have like letters that they sent and diary entries. Also you get like photographs or like things like that. Like newspaper clippings, postcards, a lot is in here. And also, if I can find one, see, like, it says Mary's one. Alison, who is the one that owns the house now, and she can see the ghost. She takes like these little like questionnaires with each of the characters, just to learn a bit more about them. And yeah, I just absolutely loved it. I love them. Next is The Girl with the Loud Voice by Abby Dare. I love this so much. This following Aduni, and it starts with her being told to become the third wife of this older, richer man in a like small Nigerian village. And she like goes there, and she's just basically there to like have babies in a sense, because you know she's a woman. Well, she's a young girl. I think she's 14 when it starts. And she holds you from page one right to the end, and she does not let you go one single bit. She is such a force, and she's such a personality, and I just absolutely loved being in her company. She goes through like lots of like horrible encounters and things, but she still has this spark of hope and joy. You cannot not want good things to come to her. Yeah, and I love the way it was written in this sort of like, it does like advance throughout the book, but it's written in this sort of I don't know if it's meant to be like a literal translation of like Yoruba to English, because she like thinks or talks in quite a basic understanding of English, but it is quite like different, and it just makes you just feel for the characters. And yeah, and just the way it explores like contemporary Nigeria and the place of women and young girls there. And yeah, and her like desire to like sort of like better her life, and you know, not just sit back and take things. She wants to, you know, talk out. She wants to have a personality. She wants to be a person with a louding voice, and it's just a delight to read, and I need to read the second one, and so I roar, which I do hope to pick up soon. Next is Sunburn by Chloe Michelle Howarth. I really enjoyed this book. This is following Lucy, and she's 15, and she lives in a small Irish village of Crossmore in the 1990s, and everyone there thinks that she should be with her childhood friend Martin, because that's just, you know, the done thing. She likes Martin. I mean, they're best friends. However, she starts having feelings for Susanna, which is another one of her friends, and this isn't really something that, you know, can happen in a small town in 90s Ireland. And it explores both of these relationships and the community and the impact of, I guess, like religion, societal pressures, and I guess people here, the girls are just grow up to become their mothers, and all the boys grow up to become their fathers, and they like stick with the same family lines, and they all get like married, and that's just the way things goes along. But she doesn't want this really anymore, because she is a lesbian woman, and it just sort of like follows her over a couple of years, and sort of what she's trying to do to break free from this societal pressure in some sense. But yeah, I'm not really going to say anything else. But yeah, I did really like the way it explored queerness in this place and time. I really liked the way it explored these characters. There's some plot points that are a little bit annoying, but on the whole, I did think it was really good, and I would love to check out Howarth again. Next is my final 4.75 and my favourite 4.75, Someone You Can Build a Nest In by John Wiswell. Oh my god, this book is so freaking cute. I loved it so much. It's so like me loving a fantasy horror romance thing as much as I love this. Who am I? Literally, who am I? I would never expect that to be this high on the list, but this was just so damn cute. I just loved it. It's basically following Shisheshan, and she is like the worm of Underwood. She's this monster creature that basically like kills and eats people, and then like uses their like bones or like body parts or like armory and stuff, and she like fixes it into herself to use as like what she needs it to be used for. But basically she is woken up during her like hibernation by people that are trying to kill her, and then she like kills and eats one of them. But she gets injured as well, so she goes to the town, and then she sort of like gets found out, so she like flees. But then this woman sort of helps her because she's like morphed into like a human figure now, and this woman Homily is coming to Underlook to try and hunt the monster down with her family, the Warfires, because apparently she put a curse on their family, and they need to kill the monster before the curse is enacted, basically. But Shisheshan's like, I never put no curse on it. Like, what are you talking about? So she like places herself within the hunt for herself in a way. But then a romance blossoms between Shisheshan and Homily, and it's sort of like Shisheshan trying to, you know, understand humanity and trying to like be like a human in a sense. But while she's doing this, she's understanding the brutality and the horrible things humans do like to each other and to other animals and species and stuff. And it's just like the way he explores things is so good, and I just loved the romance in here as well. But also like they are maybe a little bit like Arrow Ace in a sense, where like they're not too keen on like the physical contact and stuff. But yeah, I loved it. I need to like ponder my thoughts a little bit more, because also a lot of these I haven't even done reviews yet for, so yeah. But anyway, definitely give this a read. I would love to read more by Wiswell. Next is Warrior Queens and Quiet Revolutionaries: How Women Also Built the World by Kate Moss. This is an exceptionally well written and well told non-fiction book where we get to meet nearly 1,000 women throughout history, across different centuries, obviously, different, you know, locations, different ethnicities, different religions, different ages, different political views, all different types of women that made things or came up with ideas and, you know, changed things, or, you know, fought wars and stuff. These amazing women that made history, and some you have heard of like Florence Nightingale, or, you know, authors like Mary Shelley, but also many people that you have never heard of before, but they were integral to making history. Sometimes their work has not been credited to them, or, you know, it's been taken over by the men that were like, you know, in charge of them in a sense, or it was just sort of forgotten because they were women, and the history writers of the day didn't think it necessary to include their efforts because they were women. And Moss tries to change this, but it's also exploration, trying to uncover like who her great grandmother was, and she was a celebrated author in her time, but no one really knows about her anymore. And she just sort of wants to learn the history of this woman. It's a breadth study. Obviously it's not going to include every single one from history because that's impossible, but it does include so many. Yeah, I definitely think it achieved what she set out to do with this. In number 7 is The Last Witch of Scotland by Philip Paris. I love this. I loved it. This book, I think, is the one that made me cry the most this year. And that, I mean, it is upsetting, it is emotional, but I just also think when I was reading it, I was just like quite a low time, and just I had so much on my mind, and I just sort of, when it created those tears, the floodgates just opened, and I just could not stop thinking about these women that were in the book, but also so many other women that were, you know, made to be felt othered and ostracized by society and were murdered, or, you know, pushed aside because they were women in the times that they lived. and that also includes the modern day. But basically this is following Ayla and her mother Janet, and Ayla gets injured in a fire when she's young. She moves to a small Highland village with her mother, and in the present day, Janet is experienced early onset dementia, I believe. And they're such lovely people, and they have like a store and they sell things and everyone loves them, but then this new reverend comes and he thinks that, you know, they look weird and they act different and they're strange. So what does that mean? You know, there must be witches. And he makes his accusation against them, and we sort of follow the trial and like the things they go through and the way sort of the community turns on them. And there's also this traveling group of entertainers that leave Edinburgh after like a incident, and they come to this small village to, you know, to entertain, I guess. And the main like ringleader is Jack, and for the first time in many years, he and Ayla and Janet start to, you know, be happy and like things are going well, and there's a little romance brewing as well, and it's really sweet to see. But then with all the trial and everything, and yeah, that's what I'm gonna say. But I just adored these characters. I think it's a really well written and well told story. It really impacted me, and I just couldn't stop thinking about these women and others. And in a very similar vein is Hex by Jenny Fagan. This is tiny, but it packs such a punch. This is following Iris, and she is travelling back from 2021 to 1591, on the night before Gaelis Duncan is set to be murdered in an Edinburgh cell. And Gaelis Duncan was one of the first women to be accused of witchcraft. She was a girl, and murdered for this accusation. And Iris learns of sort of like what happened to Gaelis, sort of like the accusation, the trial, and, you know, leading to her to this point, and the disgusting vile things that was done to her, to try and get like a confession, I guess, basically out of her. And Gaelis is sort of like thinking, okay, you've come back now and stuff, like things are better where you've come from. But Iris tells her sort of not really. And it's sort of about like the place of women in a sense, or like their safety and the things that are still happening to women, and the lack of justice, and also perpetrators being like the police and others in power, and how like they still hold the power. And yeah, it's really eye-opening. And again, this book made me cry. I was reading this in public and I was crying on the bus. But yeah, it was really impactful. And there's also like a little bit of a magical element, which maybe I didn't love, but I think it was just done so well. And I'd love to read more by Fagan, and also check out more in this Darkland Tales series of books, which are all quite short, and they basically explore different events from Scottish history and sort of add like a little bit of a dark twist. Number 5 is Glitter Boy by Ian Eagleton. I love this so much. I love it so much. Oh my god, reading this, it brought back memories of The Madonna of Baltimore by Matt Kay, my favourite book of last year and my second favourite book I've ever read still. But this is following James, and he is like, I think he's like at the end, like the final year or so of primary school, and he loves Mariah Carey and like making up dances to her songs and stuff. Also he loves his grandma, but she has started having falls, and their relationship is like this, so like what's gonna happen? Also his new teacher is outwardly proudly gay, and he's having a wedding soon, but his dad won't let him go. Why do you think? And also he is being quite horribly bullied by another boy in the class and by other people as well. The bullying and how like little things just like grow on you, they go up and up and up, and he's just trying to learn, he's just trying to be happy and just be a child. And these people are stopping him from doing that because they think he's gay, and they think that's a problem, and they think he shouldn't be allowed to be gay. And it like touches on other things as well, when some of the things he does is a bit annoying, but he goes through a lot, and I just felt such a strong connection to him. And yeah, I don't know, I just absolutely love this book. Like, it just engrossed me so much from the first page to the last. I think it's like vitally important for people of his age to read. And they're also doing a project on people from history, like vanguards, and he is doing it on Marsha P. Johnson, and it talks about like the history of queerness and the things that we've, you know, moved forward to, but at the same time he is a boy being homophobically bullied in a classroom with a gay teacher, and that obviously that wouldn't have been a thing, especially with like section 28 and stuff, but it's still a problem that is still happening. But yeah, love this. Is The Inseparables by Simone de Beauvoir, translated from French by Lauren Elkin. I love this. It is so well written. A lot is underlined and starred and stuff. I mean, it's French fiction. It's like, that's the standard, is for it to be well written. But this had an amazing, really impactful story as well. It's also fiction. This follows Sylvie, who is basically Simone, and she's in school, this sort of like religious, sort of repressive school in a sense, and she meets Andre, who is basically meant to be her friend Zaza, and she breathes a new life into her, and they talk of, you know, politics and philosophy and life, and sort of trying to get away from the social expectations put on young women, and it follows them a little bit later when they're like in teenage years, and sort of like their relationship, and you know, moving forward, and the things that is available to them in separately, and the way their lives sort of diverge in a sense. I don't think the plot and sort of what happens is, you know, what I love so much. It was more just exploring this relationship, and it also talks about like the place of women and what was available to them at the time, and the social, I guess, expectations and standards, and, you know, in a sense it was like, you marry and you live with your husband and you have children and that's it, or you sort of become a nun, and there wasn't really much wiggle room, but obviously Simone, she went on to become, you know, a philosopher and an author, and you know, was in the literary sphere, and, you know, she thought up so many ideas, and she was such a, you know, impactful writer, but we haven't really heard of Zaza, have we? Because she did what was expected. And yeah, I loved this so much. I need to read more by de Beauvoir. This like novel was lost, and I'm just so thankful it was found and published, because it is so good. Number 3, and we have In a Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. This is so clever. Like, how she thought up this book, I am just in complete awe. I just don't know, I just cannot understand how she did this. This is basically her story of a domestic abuse at the hands of a queer woman, and it's the before, the during, and after being in this situation, and she creates this sort of idea of this dream house to tell this tale, and she uses so many different like narrative forms to move on linearly. But like, for example, a spy thriller, Cottage in Washington or something, a stoner comedy, an omen, erotica, star-crossed lovers, I don't know, like, you need to read it to experience the excellence that this book is. I mean, there's also like parts of like non-fiction about like domestic abuse by a queer woman and drawn to another queer woman, how there's so little like really ever talked about it, and the inherent sort of misogyny and sexism and lesbophobia within the not wanting to talk about it in a way. And it talks about different statistics and Yeah, so much is talked about here. It's sort of hard to like really ponder my thoughts, but all I know is that this was a powerhouse of a book. It is so important that her story is told, and that's where I'll leave you at with this, because you need to give this a read. Really, either of these could be number one. I have loved them both so much. It is sort of just like maybe this slightly edges it, but they are both exceptional. But number two is Unearthly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. This is so well written, like exceptionally well written. It's basically portrayed as a letter from a character called Little Dog, a Vietnamese queer man living in America, and he's writing a letter to his mother, who does not speak or understand English, so she'll never be able to read this letter. And he talks about so much about sort of like the generational trauma of the Vietnam War on his like grandparents and mother, also like domestic abuse and child abuse that he faced at the hands of his mother and father as well, about his like life growing up being Vietnamese, and the racism and prejudice towards him, also being queer and like the place of queer people at the time, and different, and the relationship he had with another boy, and the boy's descent into opioid addiction because of being prescribed it as a painkiller, and how he latched onto it, and the drug crisis in America and the horrific implications of this. And one of my favorite bits, like from this book, when he's telling his mother that he is gay, and he says that I didn't want to use the Vietnamese word for it, pede, which comes from the French, because our Vietnamese did not have a name for queer bodies, because they were seen like all bodies flesh and of one source, and I didn't want to introduce this part of me using the epitaph for criminals. And yeah, like you can't see, but I've got goosebumps under my study, and just so much in here is like underlined and starred, and just yeah, it's just, yeah, please give this a read. He explores so much. I need to read his poetry as well, and he has a new book coming out this year which I might pick up. And yeah, it just really like impacted me, and it just talks about so much. It's so ambitious for its size, and yeah, I thought it was great. Absolutely amazing, incredible read. So recommend. In 2022, his book was in my top 5, I think. 2023, my favorite book was The Madonna of Bolton, and in 2024, my favorite book is One Love by the one and only Matt Cain. I love this man. I love the characters he creates, and they just feel so real and so lifelike, and the things they go through are just, you know, so relatable, and just talk about so much, and the experiences, and just everything is just amazing. But this is basically, it's sort of like a love story, but it's one that you've never read before. The plot of this is, it starts in 2002, and Danny and Guy are both going to Manchester Uni trying to escape their own forms of queer oppression, and they start a friendship, and Danny basically is in love with Guy, but he doesn't tell him, and he sort of holds this secret for the next 20 years of their friendship. And then it's also in 2022, set over Manchester Pride weekend, and Danny is here to tell Guy of his love, and we follow them throughout these 20 years, and just like what they went through after uni and work and life and stuff. And he explores so much in this book about like the queer contemporary life, and sort of like the masc v femme and body image within the community, and the way that we will experience our own like forms of, you know, internalized homophobia, or like problems being gay, and the like issues like around us, and how it is different for different people. And although one thing might be perceived as easier for another person, that doesn't mean it's not hard. And we all sort of like have our own, you know, identities and experiences, and the way we move on to becoming a happier selves, you can't really correlate to everyone's. And it sort of harks back to sort of day of not really having like a route map or like a plan set out, and how there is this sort of othering still going on. I just absolutely loved it. I loved it so much. So yeah, please give this a read. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed today's video. It is long, I know, I'm sorry, but it has made me feel a bit more happier about this year's reading, going back over all these books and remembering why I love them. So yeah, hope you have a nice morning, evening, night, wherever you are in the world, and I shall see you soon. Bye.